Apple Time Warp with John Romero and Craig Johnston.
Welcome to another edition of Apple Time Warp. And did we say the last time that we only record during leap years? So expect another episode in 4 years' time. No. We really did not plan to make it so many years, but we were just busy and that stuff happens.
I just moved to Ireland.
John moved to Ireland, yes. So, that took precedence. So John, welcome back.
Yes, welcome back, Craig. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so we're talking to Chuck Sommerville today, and those of you who remember the Apple games will remember that Snake Byte, very addictive game. That's Chuck's game. Summer Games, California Games, Grubs in Space, or is it Space Grubs? I'm forgetting it now.
No, it's Gruds in Space.
Gruds in Space. There we go.
Grud was Serious Software's mascot.
Oh. So, welcome, Chuck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Chuck doesn't have very much to say since 1989. So
we're about to ask him some questions.
Yeah, so Chuck, let's start this off and say, how did you learn to program, and why did you program games?
Well, actually, I was part of an evil government experiment. That's kind of a funny way to put it. But back when I was in, how I learned how to program was back when I was in junior high school in West Virginia. There was a study that was done to see whether or not it helped to give classes of special treatment to kids who were considered talented and gifted. And I was selected for the program, and luckily I was in the experimental group rather than the control group. And one of the courses that was offered was computer programming. This was back when the only computers that were around were things like PDP-11s on college campuses. And they had a terminal set up by teletype, and I learned a little bit about programming in that class. And they had a little game, like it was like, are you old enough to drink beer? I think you put in a number, and then it would give you a response as to how old you were. I was fascinated by that, and so I wanted to write a little game, and I thought I had invented this game where you put in a number. The computer picked a number, and you tried to guess it, and it told you if you were too high or too low. Apparently, I didn't invent that game, but I did write that on that old computer, and that's how I learned how to do it. And games were fun. The computer could be entertaining, so that's how I learned how to program and got into it. That was way before I got.
What was the language you were using?
The language was called Focal, and it was, I don't know, kind of before Fortran or something like that. It was a scientific language, but yeah, it's called Focal.
Focal was popular back then. That was pre-C, I think.
And that computer actually had core memory, meaning it had little memory beads, little metal beads strung on wires for its memory.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, so Chuck, how did you get involved with Serious Software?
Okay, so I'll throw in a little step here. When the Apple II came out, by that time we had a TV typewriter, I think called a CT1024, which was a computer, which was a kit that you could make that you could have a modem and you could type on it. And I had one of those, and we connect to the college computer with that. And then I was getting Byte magazine, and then the Apple II came out, and we ordered an Apple and got one of the first ones, like serial number 354 or something like that.
Wow.
And then I had been making games for that just for fun. And there was a little guy locally that was trying to start a software company, and I wrote a couple. He took a couple of my games that I had written for fun and tried to publish them. That didn't go anywhere. But when I got to college, I met a guy named John Goodman. Yeah, he wrote Appleoids. And was making pretty good money on it. And I looked at this game and I thought, I could do at least that good writing games. So somebody challenged me, one of my dorm buddies challenged me to write a game. And I said, I bet I could write a game in 30 minutes. So I wrote the first version of Snake Byte in a half hour in BASIC, in AppleSoft BASIC. And I mean, it wasn't a very complicated game. And, we're running around the screen, with this little snake and trying to, and the guys in the dorm loved it. They thought it was a lot of fun. But they thought, it's kind of, there's only so much you can do here. And I said, well, what if I throw up a wall here in the middle of the screen? And they're like, oh, okay, that makes it more complicated. So then I started adding more walls in, and I thought, then the whole concept of having to be level based was kind of born out of that. So as far as I know, Snake Byte was the first of the Snake style games to actually have levels where you had, barriers that you had to go around.
Right. So Mark Goodman, who wrote Apple, Planetoids.
Right. You're right. Planetoids.
Yeah. So Mark Goodman, he also wrote the BIOS Code later.
Yeah. He was also a freshman at Georgia Tech. That was where I met him.
Wow, that is super lucky, because that was, there's not that many other programmers back then, especially writing Apple II stuff and assembly. And how did you learn assembly? Because Snake Byte was in assembly.
Oh, well, I had been studying assembly, but back when I was in high school, which when I got my Apple II, I was writing everything in BASIC. And my dad was looking through all the magazines, and he was kind of into the computer too. And so he started looking at this assembly language stuff, saying, "Oh, what's this stuff?" And going into the monitor. And so I looked at it, and I was under the false impression at the time that if you wrote something in assembly and ran it ran instantly and took zero time. But if you wrote it in BASIC, that it was kind of slow. So I thought, well, I got to learn how to do this assembly stuff, because that's where the really fast stuff is. So I got it, and I was writing stuff with the mini assembler long before I had an assembler, and then I learned that you could actually, as long as you didn't use a zero in your code, you could actually encode your assembly code into a remark statement. So you type, like 10 rem in AppleSoft and then a bunch of asterisks, and then you can go in and overwrite the asterisks in assembly in the monitor. And as long as you didn't use a zero, you found some other way to do it, then the line didn't terminate and it stayed as a comment. So I was embedding assembly code in remark statements.
So they would turn into tokens, right?
Yeah, they would turn into tokens, and it would look like crap, but you didn't have to load it. You could load it and integrate the assembly with your basic commands all in one thing. Oh
yeah, you would do like a call, 800 something, right. At the very beginning. That's funny. I've never heard of anybody doing that.
And then I also learned that I could hook into AppleSoft using the ampersand command. So I was writing extensions to AppleSoft BASIC as ampersand commands that loaded in with the program as remark statements.
Yeah, yep. That is pretty cool. And I remember Beagle Brothers used to print some listings that, a couple lines that looked like that, where they have assembly encoded in BASIC.
Beagle Brothers, I love that.
If you remember the DOS Boss manual, or
I remember them.
Yeah. So they used to have some listings like that.
Oh, anyway, so you asked how I got involved with Sirius. So I wrote Snake Byte, and I sent Snake Byte. First, I sent it to Sierra Online, or actually it was Online Systems at the time, and then they didn't respond, and so then I called up and I said, "Hi, I want my program back that I sent you if you don't want it." And so I'm talking to this guy and I said, "So I sent you this game called Snake. It wasn't called Snake Byte at the time." And the guy on the other end of the phone was really confused. He said, "Snake." Snake, you mean like in Wizard and the Princess? Snake? He thought I was doing a customer service call. And I said, no, there was a game that I sent you that I wanted to know if you wanted. It was a Snake game. And he goes, wait a minute, are you a programmer? And I said, yes. And it turned out it was Ken Williams.
No way.
And he said, oh, yeah, well, we looked at that, and it doesn't quite have enough, and actually it was still mostly written in BASIC at the time. And he says, so you should add some stuff to it. So then I added in the blue meanies, which nobody cares about. And then for some reason, I started shopping around different publishers because, hey, somebody's interested. And I contacted Sirius because I liked the game from Sirius. And then it got into kind of this weird bidding thing, like I said, well, what does this company have to offer? What does that have to come to offer? And I'm asking the different ones. And so I ended up sending it to Sirius. And they said, well, you need to rewrite it in assembly because we can't release it as BASIC.
Yeah.
So I rewrote it as assembly. And then they published it, and then and then I'll get around to the conversation I had with online about that. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later when I actually went back to work for them for a period of time. But anyway, so that's how I got involved with Sirius. Yeah. So then So anyway, that's how I got involved with Sirius.
Okay, so Snake Byte on the title screen has 1981 on it, copyright 1981, but it was published in 82.
Well, I don't know. There was probably some timing thing of when it came out, because the title screen, actually, the snake itself was drawn by my dorm advisor.
Oh wow! Really?
Yeah.
Did he get credit for it?
No. Actually, he just drew it on paper. His name was Killer. That's what his nickname.
Killer.
But he drew it on paper, and then I got one of those Apple tablet pads, and I traced it in. I borrowed it and traced it in from his paper sketch, and then Sirius got it, and Jerry, who wrote Easy Draw, made it a little bit longer and added the Snake Byte logo and things like that. So Jerry Jewell actually doctored that up and finished it.
Nasser wrote Easy Draw.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
Well, I think he and Jerry worked on it together, if anything, because I'm really good friends with Jerry, and I talk to him all the time, and we've talked about Easy Draw, and Jerry tells me he wrote it. So,
interesting.
I think that was the program that got Jerry excited about Nasser when Nasser came into the computer land and showed him Easy Draw.
Okay. Well, interesting.
With all does Jerry write? Did he write in assembly?
Well, he did. Actually, no. I think he wrote it in BASIC. He said, because I asked him if he programmed, and he said he wrote Easy Draw in BASIC. So,
well, didn't Easy Draw have the font routines in it, the colored font that all the Sirius games had?
Yeah, but he did not write the font routine. He says so. So that was something he did not write, was the font. So he got the routines for the fonts, and then used that.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
So before we move away from Snake Byte, I have two questions. They both relate to copying. I was starting up Snake Byte in Virtual Apple on my Mac, and of course, the first thing that brings your attention is the guys who cracked the software. So did these guys ever bug you because they were essentially giving you software for free and cracking it? Did that ever bug you?
It used to bother me back when I was younger. It doesn't bother me anymore, or didn't very long. Because there was not a lot you could do about it. And to be fair, before I became a published author, I did my own fair share of stealing software and breaking it.
Yep.
But the funny thing is that back then I'm remembering there was always a few guys that did all the games, and so you would see their splash screen come up. There was sort of like a consortium of hackers.
Oh yeah, Krakowitz and the Exterminator and the Apple Bandit, and
Oh, I never advertised that I did. The only stuff I ever did, I broke stuff for myself. The most probably the most organized breaking I ever did was Scott Adams Adventures. I put together a consortium of about 4 people, and we bought like 10 games. Well, we paid for them. We bought 10 like 10 different games from Scott Adams from his adventure series, and then I made copies of the tapes and handed them out because they were easy to copy. But he actually got some money out of us as a group.
Oh wow!
And then I asked, I when I actually became friends with Scott Adams, I earnestly asked him for forgiveness for that, and he did forgive me.
Nice.
So the second question I have about Snake Byte is, when the Nokia phones were popular, we're thinking way back in the mists of time now, they all had the Snake game. So did they copy Snake Byte, or what was going on there?
It's a tough question. I don't know what The thing is, Snake Byte wasn't the first Snake game. It was the first to have levels. There were earlier ones on other machines. In fact, I was inspired to do it because I had seen a similar game running on a business computer in a Computerland store.
Okay.
I don't know. They didn't have levels in it, so they weren't really doing Snake Byte. It was maybe kind of a look and feel thing, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, I think the ones on the Nokia phones had levels. That's why I was just wondering about that.
Oh. Yeah. Well, it
wasn't in the 80s.
No.
Yeah. Obviously, we didn't pursue it.
So you were an author who sent your stuff in remotely, so you never actually were at Sirius in Sacramento, or were you?
Well, yes and no. Okay, so I worked, I did Snake Byte, and then I actually did. At the time, I was on a work-study program called a co-op program at Georgia Tech, where I would work for a quarter and go to school for a quarter to help pay for my education. And I had been co-oping with IBM in Charlotte, North Carolina. But when I started making money off Snake Byte, I thought, well, maybe, because I'd saved up a bit of money from that, maybe I can make a go at doing software. And I asked, so I contacted Sierra and said, I'd like to do a game. I'm on this work study program. What do you think? Can I work with you guys doing a game? And they said, okay. So they had me come out to California, and they actually paid for my lodging because they had a bunch of, apparently they owned a bunch of cabins around Bass Lake. And so I came and I worked on a game for them for the summer. That game was never published, thank God. It was an
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was. We called it Hot Pursuit, and it was you were a police officer driving a car around town, responding to calls from your dispatcher, and it was. At the time, I was trying to, make something that looked like it had a bunch of scrolling in it, but it really didn't. It was just lines moving on the screen. But I was impressed by all the work that NASA was doing, with really good-looking animation and stuff, and I wanted to make something that looked good, so I tried to do something that looked good, but it didn't really have any gameplay.
When you were moving lines around on the screen, was that supposed to be like Phantoms 5?
No, it was a top view where you were driving a car around the map, and the lines were the edges of the road, so basically you were seeing the blocks scroll by, but it was just the edges of the sidewalks as you went by an intersection. No, it was well, I don't know, Autobahn. It wasn't first person; it was a top view.
Yeah. Autobahn and Autobahn and the other game are both top views. Phantoms 5 was
Phantom 5. Yeah, but like I said, it really wasn't very good, and the graphics weren't very good. I didn't have an artist, I was just drawing my own art. It wasn't it wasn't a very good game. Then I spent all summer working on it, and at the end they said, we're not going to publish this. It's not really anything here, and I was angry about it because I put all the work into it. But I'm really glad they didn't, because it would have soiled my reputation in a bad way.
Well, you also, when you made that game, you were in a cabin surrounded by other programmers at Sierra, right?
Yes, that was the really good part about it.
And there were assembly language coders.
Yes, in that cabin, along with me through the entire summer, was Chuck Boucher.
Wow.
And he was working on Lunar Leaper during that summer, so I was watching him do that game. And for a period of time, Richard Gary was sharing the cabin with us, and he had an assistant with him, some kid that he had picked up. I think it was somebody that he had worked with at the computer camp that he was a counselor at. So I got to meet Richard, and Richard was quite an interesting guy. I really liked meeting Richard. We actually took a field trip one weekend and went to the Renaissance Fair in the Bay Area. Drove all the way up, the whole group of us. So it was fun because he was really into the SCA, the whole Lord British thing. So he wanted to go to the Renaissance Fair.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you were there for the summer, basically.
Yeah, I was there for the summer. And
of
then,
82.
Of 82. And at the time while I was there, getting back to the earlier question, I asked them about the Snake Byte, and I said, well, you said that I needed to add some stuff to it. And they said, yeah, but you were supposed to add stuff to it and then send it back to us, not send it to it.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So anyway, getting back to working at Sirius, which was the actual question that you asked. So after that summer, the following winter, after going back to school at Georgia Tech, the following winter, a good friend of mine, Joe Dudar, who was a computer science major, had dropped out of school because he had decided to try to go through Georgia Tech without ever taking a break because he thought he would quit. He thought he would quit if he ever took a break. In fact, what he did was he burned himself out and he quit. So he dropped out, but he was a talented artist and coder. And I convinced him, since he was unemployed and living at home, to work on this game, this adventure game. And I just finished playing Blade of Blackpool, or playing part of it. And I thought, Blade of Blackpool, this adventure game that Sirius put out, is okay, but I can do at least that good. Kind of like the whole thing with Planetoids. So I decided I'm going to do an adventure game. And I got Joe, because he's an artist and a coder. So I did all the coding, and Joe did all the art. We moved back to West Virginia and rented an apartment because I could get one cheap there. And we worked through the winter, and we wrote this game. And I got Sirius to sign all the paperwork saying that I was working for them. And in fact, I wasn't actually there. And we wrote this game. We released it the following spring. And then Sirius contacted me, and they said, we'd like for you to port it to some other machines. I said, well, maybe I can do that on my summer break. So I came out for that's the following summer to port Gruds in Space to the Commodore 64 and the Atari 800. Oh. And then at the end of the summer, after doing those two ports over the summer, they really liked my work, and they offered me a full-time job. And I said, well, I'm going to college. And I said, if you want me to take a full-time job, you're saying drop out of college. So I would expect you to pay me what I thought I would get when I got out of college. And they said, well, what's that? And I said, $20,000 a year. And they said, okay. So that was when I dropped out of college. And, I never even went back and got my stuff out of storage.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. So you actually went to Sacramento to work there, right?
Yeah, I was there for the summer, and I never went back. And so, I didn't go back to college, and I still have my college ID and everything.
Wow. Yep, that's right. So then, when you were there, did you get to work with Mark Shermell or Tim Wilson or Eric Knopp?
Okay, so I don't think Eric was working on site at the time. And Mark Termel and Dan Goodman were both there. I didn't really mix very well with them. I maybe they just didn't really get that I had any technical prowess. But they were all really up on all the, because they had made a lot of royalties on their games, like Repton and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they were out buying fancy cars and condos, and I really didn't mix well with them. So no, I didn't spend a lot of time with them. I did spend a little bit of time talking with Tim Wilson. He was almost manager level at that point, and I could seriously tell that he was doing some very interesting stuff, and because he had helped me with he had helped build the interlaced color routines for the Commodore 64, where every line had changed 2 color registers so that we could get more color on the screen. That was used on, I think it was used on Blade of Blackpool.
Nice.
But anyway, I used it on Gruds in Space to get the color in the game. And then I after I left Sirius, I ran across Tim again at Electronic Arts and kind of rekindled my relationship with him.
Oh yeah, he'd been there forever.
Well, yeah, Tim has been at Electronic Arts forever. He actually made it to the level of being a CTO, which I asked him about recently. Actually, I said, "You're a CTO. Wow, you're way up." And he goes, "Well, there's a lot of CTOs at EA."
Wow. So, did you ever get to work with Nasser, or was that past?
No, Nasser. I don't know if I've actually ever met him face to face. He certainly didn't come into the office.
You must have met him at the 1998 reunion.
Well, I'm sure he was there, but I didn't know him.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he was there.
My biggest memory of there, other than the interview that I had with you, John, was meeting Steve Wozniak for the first time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was in the very back of the office and surrounded by everybody. And Bob Bishop actually was sitting next, in a chair next to him.
Uh-huh.
And then not too far from him was Nasser, surrounded by people.
Right. Well, I guess Woz was the only one I recognized. So.
Yeah. Yep. So let's see. Who were your influences when you were starting to code games?
Well, I was a big fan of Bill Budge's work, but I didn't understand anything about matrix math. Actually, it's not true. I knew matrix math because I had studied it in high school, but I didn't realize how it applied to 3D graphics. And Budge was doing it, back in the day.
Yeah.
So he was a big influence. And of course, the games I was playing, because I got all the games from Sirius for free. So I was the stuff that Mark Trammell was doing and Dan Thompson were doing. That was an influence. And of course, the stuff from Nasser was just I thought was just amazing. And I didn't realize just how fast he was. But apparently his secret weapon was to maintain a really good library of functions. Well, so he could just throw stuff together because he already had all the routines.
Okay, so he kept that in a block of memory or something? Because the way that Nasser programmed was directly into the mini assembler. He never had source code.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he could only keep games in his head for about 2 weeks.
Okay, well, so I learned something about Nasser. I assumed that he had an assembler. I didn't have an assembler until I got to college.
Which one did you use?
I started out with the Lisa assembler, and I think that Mark Goodman gave me a copy of it.
Nice. Yeah, I was a Merlin guy. I actually used Merlin on the command line. When it was just a line by line instead of a full text editor. So it was really like Nasser and Bill Budge, and then some of the other guys there, Dan, and Mark. So let's see. What was your experience like developing Snake Byte? Like, was that you programmed it in BASIC, and you use low res to do collision detection?
Actually, the game runs in low res.
Right, you're just echoing the graphics in high res.
Yeah,
right?
so it was written in BASIC, in low res with I think there's a command in BASIC to read the color of the screen. I think there's like an SCRN command or something like that. So plot and SCRN, and the colors that are on the low res screen are actually the direction that the snake was traveling when you hit it. When it was moving. So there's actually only two live entities on the screen, which is the head and the tail. And the tail just follows the encoded path.
That's right.
And then, so I knew that it needed to be in high res because all the games were in high res. So I didn't change the game logic. I just rewrote the low res version in assembly, and then additionally did a render to the high res screen. So that's how the game plays. It's funny. Cool. Originally, there was a high score screen in the basic version when I originally submitted it, but there wasn't a good way to save it to disk because they wanted the disk to be copy protected. So we actually removed the high score screen.
Wow. They weren't going to give you any routines to just write to a sector somewhere. They just said, don't even try to do I.O.
There wasn't even a notch on the disk, so you couldn't write to it.
There you go. There's one way of copy protecting. And it's funny because it reminds me of Castle Wolfenstein because it also had a low-res screen below the high-res.
Fun.
Yeah, to do collision detection. And you wrote Snake Byte in BASIC while you were in high school, last year of high school?
No, I was in college. I was at Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, okay.
Right. And I had by that time I had already met Mark Goodman. So
Okay. And when you made 29 levels for some reason, so 30 levels.
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't think anybody would make it to level 29, and I was running out of ideas for levels because they were just getting more and more absurd.
Do you remember level 29?
As I recall, level 29 was basically a maze of single wide passages. Actually, it wasn't so much a maze, more of a labyrinth, I would think.
Yeah.
Basically you had to be perfect and hope beyond hope that it didn't put an apple in a place that you couldn't get to in time.
Yeah. It was so hard. That level was so hard.
And in fact, like I said, I designed the levels to be asymptotically difficult because this was back in the days of video games where people, you didn't expect people to make it to the end, and I didn't expect anybody to finish level 29. But there was the really odd chance that somebody might do it. So I made it loop back to level 1 just in case.
And that was a good idea because that's what I did. Did you hear of anybody else beating the game?
I've heard of one other person, but I don't know who it was. But as far as, you're the only name that I can point to and said John Romero finished it.
Wow.
So when you got to level 29, there was no reward at the end, and you say you just went straight back to the beginning.
Yep. Yeah, probably just pissed you off.
No, I was happy to get to the beginning and keep on playing. I think I wrapped it twice.
Wow.
I get to pass 29 a second time, but I died on the third try. On the third set of levels. Probably because I was really tired.
I have to tell you, it's just so amazingly honored by that, because to have a legend such as John Romero enjoy my first commercial piece that much is a tremendous honor.
I love the game. You did an amazing job on it. In fact, I loved it so much that I made my own version called Crazy Cobra that had 50 levels. And it was published.
Oh. And I never heard about it.
Yeah, it was published on Uptime Disc Monthly in 1987.
Before we move on, while we're talking about Snake Byte, I want to throw in an interesting story about Snake Byte. Before it got published, Sirius contacted me. This is related to Snake Byte clones. Sirius contacted me and said, "Have you heard of this other game called Nibbler?" I think it was called Nibbler.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was this clone of the game. There was another version of Snake Byte out there, and I don't believe it had levels. But they said there's this other game that we know about, and we're worried that they'll think, did you see this game? Did you steal this game? Whatever. And I said, no, I don't know anything about it. And they said, well, to be safe, we're going to buy the rights to it just to take it off the market so that we don't have legal problems. And we want you to pay for half of that out of your royalties.
Wow.
So, what could I do? I had to agree. So they didn't pay me the first portion of my royalties because of it. Now, what's amusing about the story, this is where it gets interesting. When I went to work at Epix, I had been there. I had done the port of Summer Games, and then Jerry and I went off to try to do our own software development studio, and then that didn't work. And then I went back to Epix full time, and I was living there in the Bay Area, working there, and we were working on another game. And I wander into, I think it was either Scott Nelson or Steve Landrum's office, and the two of them are in this office, and one of them turns to the other, points to me, and says, "Is this the guy?" And I look back and forth between these two guys, and that's all he said. I look back and forth between these two guys, and I said, "You've got to be kidding!" And
no way.
Steve Landrum was the guy that wrote the other Snake game and hit the. And wow. I knew what they were talking about from that. And so it's so funny because Steve
you cost me money.
It was very funny, but Steve is such a good friend of mine now, and we worked together for so many years on so many things. But to find that out at that point was just amazing.
That is funny. Snake, the idea of Snake, like Snake Byte, that kind of game originated in a 1976 game called Blockade.
Oh, actually, I used to play that in the arcade. But
yeah,
it was
that was the first one.
Yeah.
Yep, that was it. Let's see. So Gruds in Space, you wrote that with a Joe. And
yeah.
How many years later after, was that your game right after Snake Byte?
Okay, so I wrote Snake Byte, and then I think then I spent the summer at Online, and then the following winter was Gruds in Space, and then it was released that spring, and then the following summer was when I ported it to this Commodore 64 and the Atari 800.
Okay. Did Gruds in Space do well?
No. In fact, it was. Let's be honest, it's not that great of an adventure game. But it turned out that there was a bug in it, and at one point in the story, you open a chest, and when you open the chest, it automatically gives you the contents of the chest, and what happened was because you don't pick up that inventory when it adds it to your inventory, it's possible if your inventory is full at the time for it to overflow your inventory when that happens, and it causes the game to crash.
Wow.
So I had to patch the game, and they had to recall all of them and replace them, and according to Jerry, it basically killed the profitability of the game.
Oh, man. Bugs. That's a good.
You can't patch it across the internet.
Right. There was no internet. So let's see. You did Snake Byte. You did the game during the summer at Sierra. Then you did Gruds. Then you ported Gruds, right?
Right.
And then was Epix right after that?
So after that. Sirius, I started working on another game for Sirius, and again, I was trying to do something that looked amazing and wasn't fun. Same mistake I made at Sierra, but it didn't get developed very far before Sirius imploded and went out of business. So,
the game industry got hit pretty hard that year.
Well, Sirius was hit with another really big problem. They had been working with Fox to release a bunch of games. I guess like 20th Century Fox. They were releasing a bunch of VCS games for 20th Century Fox, and there were legal issues that came up with it. And the story, as I'm told by Jerry Jewell, they had hired a lawyer to handle this deal, and the lawyer kept taking money from Sirius for this lawsuit. But apparently what the lawyer was doing was embezzling the money that he was taking from them.
That's right.
And he essentially stole tons of money from Sirius, and Sirius could not survive it. And they went bankrupt over the lawsuit and the corrupt lawyer.
Was that 84?
Yeah, 83-ish, 84.
83, 84. And that was also a bad time to be on VCS because the whole industry cratered on the VCS.
Right. So anyway, so Jerry, when the company closed, I went along with Ernie Brock, who was the guy who wrote Type Deck. And
that's right.
he recruited me to go work for a company that was writing page layout software for newspapers. And the main customer of that company, which was located in the Sacramento area, was the San Jose Bee. No, yeah.
Okay.
And
so Sacramento Bee, and then there's a San Jose Bee.
No, it was a Sacramento Bee, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, it was some big newspaper.
Okay. And
anyway, so I was there for 2 weeks, trying to learn how to write page layout software. And Jerry calls me up and says, do you want to write newspaper software? Or do you want to write games? And he said, I've got a gig with Epix, and I guess he had a contract job there doing as a project manager. So he got them to hire me full time, so I got benefits, and but I was still living in Rancho Cordova.
Oh yeah,
and where Sirius was. And so we hired another contract programmer from like Louisiana or something like that, some guy that Jerry had submitted games to Jerry, and Jerry knew was available. And he moved out into my 2-bedroom apartment, and we ported summer games from Epix, from the Commodore 64 to the Apple II over a summer.
Wow.
And that's how I got involved in that. And then at the end of that project, Jerry wanted to move on. He didn't want to work for Epix anymore. So he recruited me away from Epix, and we started this little software development studio called Soft Pros that never got any work ever. And so I was living on credit cards. So finally at one point I said to Jerry, look, I can't do this anymore. I got to go. So I contacted Epix, and they were kind enough to rehire me and reinstate me and count it all as some sort of a vacation, so I didn't lose any of my contract royalties or anything. So I moved to the Bay Area and started working full time at Epix, and I was there for 7 years.
Wow, that's pretty great. Where in Rancho Cordova did you live?
So Sirius Software was right off of Mather Field Drive, which was Mather is big Air Force base.
Yeah.
And there was a little apartment complex within easy walking distance of the office, because I didn't have a car at the time, called the El Mercado Apartments or something like that, because it was on El Mercado, and it was really very, very low income housing. A lot of the people there were people that worked at the Air Force base. So
that's right. The El Mercado Apartments.
Yeah, I think that was El Mercado Apartments, and it's like this kind of roach-infested place. I don't know. It was really, I didn't really realize at the time because I was used to dorms. Just how low income it was. But I did meet a fun guy there he painted the apartments when they were vacated. This guy named Tony Adorno, and he was really into fast cars and fast motorcycles, and I'm really lucky that I didn't die hanging out with him.
That's funny. But, because Rockingham Drive is right behind it.
Yeah, and then Yeah, Tony and I would go up to Caesar's Tahoe on Wednesdays to play blackjack because we were practicing card counting.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Rockingham was where Sirius was, right?
Yep, exactly. So it's easy walking distance from the El Mercado apartments.
It's funny is 2 streets down from that is Data Drive, and I used to live on Data Drive in Rancho.
Okay.
That's nuts.
Small world.
Yeah, definitely. So you got reinstated back at Epix. So
right.
They're super nice company to do that. And then that's when you started to port, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of it had the reason I was reinstated was that the programmers like Steve Landrum and Scott Nelson, when I think they basically thally that it would be impossible to port their Commodore 64 code to the Apple II, and when they saw the work that I had done, that I was actually able to do it, I think they were impressed and probably said, "Yeah, we should probably hire this guy back."
Nice.
But when you did those ports, I have a question about the ports, though, because I can understand going from Apple to Commodore, and in those days, the Commodore had a better sound system in it. But now going from Commodore to Apple, you're essentially getting worse. I wonder how you took those sound routines and graphic routines and converted them over.
Well, the sound
he couldn't.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
The Apple had no sound routine.
Right.
There was no hardware for graphics or sound on the Apple, and the Commodore had a SID chip and it had graphics, so it could just automatically do it at hardware speed. But the Apple didn't have anything like that, so that's why it was harder to write this stuff. For Chuck to port that stuff over was way harder.
Yeah,
right. For the Apple II.
So for the sound. Basically, I only implemented a white noise, which is easy with a random number generator for like little bursts of explosions, and solid tones. So I could play the country themes during the award ceremonies, and I could do like gunshot sounds and things like that for the starts of races. That's all I did for sound. For the graphics. I basically had to write a sprite emulator, and I used a trick that I learned by studying what was going on in, I think it was Hadron, which was doing large-scale blocks of graphics on the Apple II. I looked at that
code.
It
was unbelievable.
And what they had done was they had this unwound loop that could draw a band of graphics vertically down the screen. So it would the address at each graphics line on the left-hand side of the screen was in the unwound loop, and then it was indexed by Y, the Y register, for how far across the screen. And what he would do was when they were going to draw a segment, was they would use self-modifying code and poke a return instruction in where they wanted the line to end, and then jump in at the beginning, draw the strip, and then go back and restore the code. And that's how they would draw real fast vertically. So I did something similar to there's this exclusive OR and exclusive OR store trick that you can do to mask graphics into a bitmap. So I wrote a routine like that was unwound vertically like that, and that's how I was drawing large blocks of masked data into the screen. And then I would also buffer the background behind it with the similar routine, so that after I drew it and display it across the page, then I would erase only that section that I had drawn on because I had buffered it and saved just that block.
Yeah, it's as fast as you can get. That's pretty much it. Also, you mentioned Hadron. And
Hadron.
were you at Sirius when the source was typed in?
No. I did that by studying the memory footprint.
You looked at Hadron's code in memory.
Yeah. I hit reset and I started searching with the mini assembler through the code to try to see what the heck was going on, and I found this unwound loop and I went,
Did you hear about how that game was written?
No.
So Larry Miller is the guy who wrote Hadron and Epic, EPOCH,
Yeah.
And he wrote these games basically by dictating them to his secretary.
Wow.
So he basically dictated them. His secretary shorthand wrote all the source on notepads, and then basically he came to Sirius, and the secretary came there, and while he's sitting there chatting with Jerry and Nasser and those guys, she's typing all this stuff into an assembler.
That's amazing.
And then they ran it, and it ran the first time. Wow. And it was all shorthand written on notepads, the whole game. And basically there was an error in the rendering of the score. That was it. That was the only bug in the whole game. And this is all 3D code that's crazy that he had done. And so that was one of the most unbelievable stories I've ever heard about programmers and just dictating his source.
That is amazing.
So you were looking at Larry Miller's code. That was some of the best code written.
Yep.
And so you were there as the Apple II hotshot guy to basically port over California games. And did you think that you're probably going to do some other winter games and summer games? And
I didn't port California games. I was actually on the League Commodore 64 version, the original team for California games. But I did make a transition from being their Apple guru to being a C64 expert. But one of the things I was doing there at the time was when I arrived there, they didn't even have a disk loader for the Apple II.
Oh wow!
So I wrote their first disk loader, which I used the read-write track sector routine. So just enough to boot up and get running. I basically stole the first track 0 from Apple's disk, which was enough to get a sector up and running. And from there on, I just loaded tracks in with the read-write track sector, and I wrote this thing called bare bones DOS, where you would write binary files to the disk, with an instruction list that says where they go, and it would write binary files to the disk. And that's how they were making the Apple II games for a while.
That's funny. Yeah, I basically did a project just like that for Infocom, where I wrote a ProDOS drop-in replacement that had to fit in 4K. And it was basically our own RWTS plus the ProDOS MLI interpreter to take, to basically pretend that I'm ProDOS, but to handle path names and sectors and drives and all that. And then also hide it in a bank switch memory so it didn't exist.
Ah, great.
So it's one of those, you need to do that.
So they had depended on me to create that. But at one point, my manager shows me this game for the Apple II, this race car game that I was obviously struggling. It's not having much speed. And he asked me, he said, can this be done any better? Because he's trying to make a managerial decision what to do with this game that they're working on. And I looked at the game, and I knew that I felt that I was making a career decision. And I said, if I say that this can be done better, I'm going to be the one doing it. And I don't want to. And I don't want to continue writing Apple games. So I lied to him. It's like the only time I've ever lied to a manager. And I said, no, this is as good as it's going to get. And then I went on to join the main team of programmers writing games for the Commodore 64.
Wow. And what game was that?
Same question. That was probably Summer Games 2 or Winter Games or something like that. There are so many of the game series; they all ran together for me.
That's funny. So you got onto, because you were great at porting. Did you read like Mapping the Commodore 64 or one of those books to learn everything?
Well, we had a manual. I think the C64 manual might have the hardware registers in it. But the guys that were there, Landrum and Nelson and Dennis Caswell, all those guys, they all came from the VCS days, and they were used to basically reverse engineering a piece of hardware to pump every bit of juice out of it they could. So they knew the hardware, the register set really well, and I learned from those guys how to do everything I was doing. And it was, so.
I'm sure you love having raster interrupts.
Yeah, that was awesome. But to be fair, I had done a little bit of that when I ported Gruds in Space to the C64. So I knew the hardware a little bit from my port work.
That's right, because you had to have mixed mode graphics on top with high res on the bottom, right?
Well, yeah, we had to have text at the bottom and had to have high res at the top. But most of that code, that interrupt code, had been written by Tim Wilson. So okay. I didn't really need to know it that well, but I need to know the hardware registers a little bit to do Gruds in Space.
Right.
But then when I did the Atari 800 version, I had to learn about display lists and things like that. So
that's right, player missile graphics.
I was starting to learn about interrupts, the raster interrupts, back at Sirius.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure you're like, I like this hardware better.
Yeah, it was definitely better.
And then while you were at Epix, after you did the original Summer Games 2 and California Games, did you do Destroyer right after that?
Yeah, Destroyer. I had been working pretty closely with Michael Kasaka on a lot of different projects. He was one of our main artists. And he had this vision of doing this World War II destroyer simulator game. It was all his design. And he got it past the approval process to this game, and recruited me on to his project to do this. And of course, I was happy to work with Michael because he was such a great artist, and all I had to do was take his artwork and breathe life into it.
Nice.
So we made this game, and he designed all the screen layouts and everything. He just basically said, okay, now this game, on this screen the game works like this, and on this screen the game works like this. And it was almost like doing a Summer Games game, right? Because they were like different the different stations you could play at were like different events in one of the sports games.
Nice.
But he would describe the missions. It's okay. So we need to take the ships, and they're going to go across this field of water, and there's going to be islands. So I was doing essentially algorithmic terrain generation in that game to generate randomly generate the island clusters, and then I'd do this object avoidance so the ships could actually be smart enough to go around the islands and things like that. So it was kind of interesting. But the other interesting thing about Destroyer was I said, the schedule was tight on it. And I said, I'm going to need some help. So we hired another programmer, who was a junior programmer to me, that was writing routines to support me. I said, okay, I need a routine to do this, so I don't have to write the routine. So I had an assistant. But I also said, there's no way that I'm going to be able to finish this game in time and be able to test it. So you need to hire somebody to test all the stuff I'm doing. So they hired this guy to test it. And as far as I know, it was the first time Epix had ever hired a tester. And
that's great.
So we hired this guy. His name was Raul or something like that. Anyway, I think Raul Peterson or something like that. He ended up being an important tester guy at Electronic Arts eventually, because I ran across him again there too. But yeah, he was great. We had a tester.
Wow, for the first time. For the first time,
Epix had a tester, and it was because of Destroyer.
Was there? What was the design influence behind Destroyer?
Well, you'd have to ask Michael Kasaka that.
He was the one. Yeah.
Well, he's Japanese, and but American Japanese. He didn't speak with an accent or anything. But I'm sure that he had a deep interest in World War II, and being from his heritage, so it was his vision to do this game.
Cool. So then, did you do? You worked a little bit on. Was Chips Challenge at this point, or was this around the time of the handheld color?
The Lynx.
Yeah, Lynx. Yeah.
Well, those two events are intimately tied together. So Epic's upper management decided they wanted to. I don't know how this deal came about, but they decided they were going to make this piece of hardware. At the time, it was codenamed Handy, and the company was actually pretty big at this point. There's probably over 100 employees. And after we got the Lynx the Handy project running, there were easily 150 people, and we were at 600 Galveston Drive, which oddly enough is where 3DO ended up.
Wow.
So we were at 600 Galveston Drive, and they bring in R.J. Michael and Dave Needle, who were the principal architects behind the Amiga, and they're going to do this handheld game, this handheld system called the Lynx, and they've set up some sort of deal with some Japanese manufacturer or Asian manufacturer, and they lock off a section of the building. You had to have special card keys to get in to make it all secret, and I got onto that group, as well as other really great programmers, like Steve Landrum. And we're working on games for this amazing hardware. It's got a Blit engine in it. I mean, we're not talking sprites. We're talking Blit engine. This is really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And so I had been really influenced by there was a game on the Amiga where you drove a tank around and blew stuff up. And Return Fire, I think it was. Okay. So I wanted to do a tank game like that, but I wanted to try to do it first person. Steve Landrum had written a triangle engine that could draw a right triangle in a solid color on the Lynx by basically
it's called Firepower.
Oh, Firepower! Yeah, that was it. Firepower, exactly. So Steve had written this thing that could draw a right triangle by taking a triangle and scaling it in X and Y. And I was trying to put that together to draw polygons to do this tank game. And in the demo reel for the Lynx, when we were trying to sell the thing, there's actually video of this tank game that never came to be. And it turned out I didn't know enough about 3D to actually pull it off. So we were getting close to the end of the release of the Lynx, and the tank game was canceled because it wasn't going to happen. And so I didn't have anything to do. So I said, I really want to do this game. I want to do this game where you wander around a maze, and I was really heavily influenced by Sokoban, but I wanted to do something a bit more. I said, I want to have keys and doors and push blocks around and have monsters wandering around, all this stuff. And a lot of it harkened back to a game that Chuck Boucher had written in the Laugh Pack, which was there was this map-based game that you wandered around in Laugh Pack, and I was intrigued by that kind of map-based game. So I wrote up a quick little prototype on the Apple II in low res, with 2x2 blocks in low res representing the game elements, to kind of show how the action would run, because I can get it to run fast enough.
Yeah.
And I said, this is what I want to do, but I want to make it look pretty, of course, because we got the Blitter engine, and I got approval to do it. And it was like the first time ever at Epix that I was able to do a game that I designed.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is great. And what was cool about it was that since we were getting close to the end of release, there were all these other programmers and testers that were coming off of projects for the Lynx that were finishing up. So I had an army of help behind me, and we finished this game in 10 weeks. That's a month and a half, unheard of at that time.
Yeah.
And, but it was only because I had, and you can see on the credits, there's, like a dozen or so level designers, and, there's a bunch of testers. So we were able to finish this thing. And it's funny, the level editor, we used D-Paint.
That's hilarious.
As the level editor, because John Luke had figured out how to use the tile mode on D-Paint and was using it to generate levels for there was the I'm trying to remember, Return to Gauntlet or something like that, which was one of the Lynx titles, and he was using it to design levels for it. So he would take the bitmap that was generated and digested to get the data, because all the tiles that he was drawing had numbers encoded across the top edge as pixels, kind of like barcodes. So there was a palette of them on the right-hand side. There was a starter picture that you started with that had all the game icons on the right-hand side. And in tile mode in D-Paint, you would grab one of these tiles and plop it in the map where you wanted it. And then the monsters were on the second line of that barcode, so you could drop a monster on top of a tile and have two things in the same tile. So that's how we designed all the levels for Chip's Challenge, was using a pixel editor.
That's funny. So I had to recognize each of the tiles to know what to put on the screen to build a map out, I guess.
Yeah, it was just digesting the bitmap and turning it into the binary data for the level.
Wow.
But you could visually see the level as you were designing. So we didn't have a level editor. We used Deluxe Paint.
That is pretty cool. Now, were you making that for the links?
The links. It was one of the original titles for the links.
Okay, and when you did after Chip's Challenge, did you do Electrocop and then Zarlor, or were those before it?
Okay, so if you look at Moby Games, I'm listed on a lot of games for the links, but most of the games that I'm listed on, my credits are there because some code that I had written is in there. And I had written, I think it was written for Chip's Challenge. I had written it, I think, for the title screen. I had written a thing to animate the title screen. And the code was generally useful, so it was used in some of the other games for their title screens.
Nice.
And so I got some credit in those other games as being one of the programmers on it when I really didn't work on it. But I think in the case of Electric Cop and on Gauntlet, I did some level design as well.
Nice. Cool. But Chips was your really big game there.
That was my game. But you mentioned Zarlor. Now Zarlor is a whole different story. Zarlor was not part of the original game release. Not part of the was not one of the original games.
Right. It came out later.
It came out much later, and what happened with Zarlor? This was after the fall of Epix. So Epix ran into financial problems, as have many a company. And they went from 150 people down to 15 people, not 15 programmers. So there's an article out on Retro Gamer that I'm quoted as saying we went from 150 programmers down to 15 programmers, but no, it was 150 people down to 15 people. And I was one of the people that they kept, along with I think two other programmers.
Wow.
And so we moved to a smaller building, which was right above a Bales bondsman.
Did this happen? This happened at the very beginning of 1989.
I don't know what the date was.
Well, I remember
it was close to the beginning of '89 because when I wrote Chip's Challenge, I was married to Cynthia, and her name is in the credits. And then we were married for about a year, and then got divorced. And then around '89 was when I started dating Jennifer, who has been my wife for 23 years now. So we were in this building above the Bales bondsman, it's this really cruddy office. We're all crammed in there, and that's where I wrote Zarlor Mercenary, because I said, well, they're like, well, what would you like to do? What do you want to work on? Which is kind of, refreshing. And I said, well, I think I'd like to do, a scrolling shooter. And they said,
Xevia
great.
style, right?
Yeah, Xevia style. And they said, sure, we think we could sell that. So, got a decent artist and a decent sound guy, and we're designing levels. Steve Landrum is back with the company at this point. He rejoined us, and Steve helped me some with the code. I knew that the game was going to be too big to fit in memory, and including the code. So it was the first time I wrote a dynamic linker. Code
paging?
the code block had a data block at the beginning of it, which was a list of addresses within the code block that needed to be patched to relocate it. It would load the code blocks in and patch it so that it would run in the new location. So it was swapping out blocks. Code. Yeah, it was swapping out blocks of code as you went through the level, along with graphics, so that the entire level could fit.
Wow. Yeah, that's like Ultima 5 did that. What they did was they grouped commands that were similar together, like look and search, etc. And they would have a code page in memory. It wasn't just one page. It was several pages of memory, but it was a block of code. And whenever you switched to a completely different command, it would then load from disk the different code and overwrite the code in memory for it, and just use jump vectors at the beginning. So it's a similar idea. It's not enough memory for the whole game, so you have to load in code on top of code.
Right. So Zarlor Mercenary did that.
And did you come up with the name Zarlor Mercenary?
Yes, I did. I came up with the name Zarlor Mercenary and Zarbits, which is the currency in it, and the basic story, which is that you're a mercenary and you're trying to you've been hired to fight in this battle. So yeah,
I love the game, by the way. I played the hell out of that.
Pardon? You say, what'd you say, John?
I played the hell out of Zarlor Mercenary. I loved it. We actually all of id Software played Zarlor more than any other game.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and it was a 4-player game. It was the first time I had ever done. Oddly enough, none of the game series you could play simultaneously. So it was the first time I'd ever done a game where more than one player was playing at a time.
Wow. Yeah. It was really fun. It was
glad you liked it.
Yeah. And you know what? We love the links so much that Atari, after Wolfenstein, Atari worked with us to create their signature character that would be a Mario or a Sonic for them. And it was a character that was called Pounce.
Okay.
And so we were working with, and it was because of the links. In fact, if you know Commander Keen,
I know Commander Keen.
Yeah, his Pip Boy like computer wrist thing is an Atari Lynx with the Atari Lynx rubbed out of it. If you look at it, if you look at it, it's the Atari Lynx just with the Atari Lynx scratched off of it.
Cool.
Brilliant.
So then that was like 91, I remember. Zarlor was around 91.
Right.
And then after Zarlor, what did you do?
Well,
you left Epix, or
Epix was still struggling, and we did at that time. Matt Householder was still at Epix, and Matt Householder, I think, was the visionary behind California Games. Although Kevin Furry and I co-managed California Games. Anyway, Matt came up with this idea that he would that we could do. Laptops were starting to become popular, so he wanted to make a set of games that were specifically designed to run on laptops. So we made this package called Laptop Games that was in black and white. And it was okay. They were like solitaire games and stuff like that. And Peter Engerbright was there, and he was working on the project as well. And Gil Colgate was on the project. So it was like maybe 4 programmers on that project. We did that Laptop Games, and I think about that time, I don't remember why. I decided I was going to leave Epix, and I don't really remember what it was. Maybe I was fired. I don't know. But I don't remember them firing me. But I do remember that I basically had enough, and I kind of went solo for a while, and I was getting. I got a contract job at Equilibrium, converting a coin-op game, Road Riot, to the Super Nintendo. And then I worked for, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Yeah, Fuzzy, Kevin Furry recruited me into a company called Tech Magic, which was somewhere around Belmont.
Belmont.
Somewhere in that area. Anyway, so I was working for them. That we were working on a game, a Steven Seagal themed game, and that game never went anywhere. And then, they fired Kevin Furry. You know, there were political problems at that company, and they fired Kevin Furry, and they thought that they could hang on to their programmers, that they fired the guy who recruited all the good talent.
Oh, no.
All the people who were decent programmers of the company quit when they fired Kevin, including me. You know, and it was all political because basically Kevin was very headstrong, and they couldn't deal with somebody who was headstrong and was going up against management. So anyway, so I left Tech Magic, and I got a job at Electronic Arts, and I was at Electronic Arts, and I started out doing. I think I was working on Michael Jordan and Chaos in the Windy City, which was another Super Nintendo game. And then I went on to work on F-114 Night Eagle or something like that, which was a flight simulator, working with Chris Ebert. Then I went into the coin ops division there for a little while. Got to work with Ed Logg, who is an Atari coin op guy. And then that project didn't go anywhere. Then I went on to the advanced development team at Electronic Arts, and I was doing a port of Shockwave from the, I guess it was originally on the Amiga, over to the PlayStation. Okay. And then at the end of that project, my manager at the time was writing a really bad review of my performance. He didn't like me. I didn't like him too much either. Yeah. And I looked at the review he wrote, and I said, I don't need this. You know, you're torpedoing my career here, and I don't need this. So I quit rather than getting that bad review, and I contacted 3DO because I had friends over there, and 3DO just snatched me right up to go work on the M2 project, which was their next console.
That's right.
So I go into the first day. It's a really funny story. I go in the first day, and Trip Hawkins, who ran 3DO, liked to greet everybody on their first day. So we're sitting around this conference table, all the new recruits for the day, and he's going through reading the names off the interviews, and he's, you know, attaching them to all the faces, you know, and saying, hi, welcome to 3DO, here's what we do here. And so he goes through it, and he turns to me and he says, Chuck, I don't see your resume here. And I said, no, it should be there. And he looks again, and he says, it says Charles Sommerville. He says, I just know you as Chuck. And I had never actually met Trip Hawkins before. And I'm like, this guy knows me by my name. Trip Hawkins knows, you know, Chuck Sommerville by name. It's I was really stunned by that. I'm like, wow, that's a great compliment.
Did he say where he heard your name?
No, we went on with the conversation at that point, but you know, the opening interview. But I was just I was really amazed by that.
It had to be from EA and Sirius.
Well, he wasn't at EA when I worked at EA. Because
he was you know, like there he started EA. Obviously,
he was the starter of EA.
But I think he knew your name from Sirius's games at that time because he started in November of '82. Sure.
So the other thing that's interesting I'll just quickly talk a little bit about working at 3DO, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So I worked on the M2 project, which was canceled, and there were a lot of people that were really sad that the M2 didn't make it, including Bill Budge, who was doing some tech programming there. I really loved meeting him and seeing what he was capable of. And I said to Bill at the time, you know, he said, aren't you upset? And I said, no, not at all. I said, I got to work on bleeding edge hardware, and I got to work with some really amazing people, and I learned a lot here. You know, it wasn't, you know, it was, overall, it was a good experience. Yeah, the hardware didn't make it out, but it was a good experience.
Yeah.
But Trip Hawkins had an open door policy at 3DO, so his door was open. Anybody could walk in at any time and talk to him, and most people didn't, but I actually did. About every month or so, I would walk in. I would just, you know, unannounced, I would walk in and sit down, and I would just talk to him. And so I got to know Trip a little bit, and I think he actually appreciated that I did that because he got a different pulse on what was going on in the company from me than he was getting from, you know, his directors and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Bill Budge was he was making Blade Force there, right?
I think so. But the technology he showed me that was really cool was he was building a NURB-based renderer where you defined your models with splines, and then it would build the polygon list from it, so that the resolution could change as you got closer or farther away algorithmically.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool.
And then when I left 3DO, Tripp called me into his office and he said, "So why are you leaving?" And I said, "Well, my friend Kevin Furry and I, we want to do LEDs. We think we can make a go at making LED displays, and LEDs are cool." And I said, "It's a startup and it's my startup." And he said, he says, "So it's not about the money, And I said, "No, it's not about the money." He said, "Well, if it's about a startup, there's no way I can stop you."
He knows what that's all about.
he said, I'll be glad to hire you back at any time. You're welcome here.
That's pretty cool. So then that was in '98.
Yeah, probably around '98. I don't remember the exact year, but probably.
And then you went and did LEDs, basically starting in 1998.
Yeah, so we started this company called LED Effects, and that's a whole huge story. It's not related to games, but I'm still working for doing LEDs, and the original company that we had, LED Effects, we make custom LED displays. The best known project we worked on was we built the Times Square ball that you just recently saw this New Year's Eve,
Really?
And then we built it again when they wanted it bigger.
Wow!
And then so that was a great project, a lot of fun. I got to go to New York and see that ball in 2007 come down and from the VIP booth. That was a great experience. And then that company ended up. Through corporate mergers and stuff, ended up kind of going away. And, when you have corporate mergers like that, you end up often firing the founders. So Fuzzy and I both got fired, and we started a new company called Kibo Works, which also does custom LED displays, and that's what I'm doing now. We're doing custom artworks and things. In fact, John, you won't be able to see this because you're in Ireland now, and Craig, you won't be able to see this because you're not on the West Coast. But in San Jose, on Santa Clara Street, between the Convention Center and the Sharks Arena, there's a new artwork that we just installed, designed by an artist named Dan Corson. It looks like a bunch of donuts on the bottom of the underpass, the 87 underpass, and it actually interacts with the mobile game called Ingress, which is a territory, GPS-based territory land grab. And when you play the game, if you're standing there, the artwork will actually react to you in the game.
Huh. Wow, is that Great America Parkway? Right there?
It's Santa Clara Street, where it crosses Highway 87.
Oh, 87. Okay.
Where it goes under 87.
Cool. Yeah. Wow, that's real close to where I was at. In Santa Clara. So while were doing the LED effects stuff in your spare time, you remade Chip's Challenge in a game called Tile World.
Yeah, way back. Actually, Tile World was the working title for Chip's Challenge before it was released. And so I did not write the PC version of Tile World that people are playing. That was Brian Rader. He was a Chip's Challenge fan. He did a detailed analysis of Chip's Challenge, both the PC version and the Lynx version, and created basically an emulator for it, Tile World, with my blessing. He contacted me about it before he did it. Wow. And by this time, people had already reverse engineered the Microsoft release data format for the level set. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of new level sets being generated by. There's still a very active Chip Challenge community developing level sets for the game. And
nice.
The community contacted me way back 17 years ago or so, or maybe 20 years ago by now, and they said, "We really want a sequel. We really like this game. Can you do another one?" So I wrote Chips Challenge 2. It's got like 70 new game elements.
Wow.
And when I started the project, I contacted the company who owned the rights to the name Chips Challenge at the time. When Epix never really folded, they were acquired by a Christian media company that sold Christian videos, because Peter Ingerbright, who is a very religious guy, in the very last attempt to save Epix, convinced them to do a religious game that he wanted to do called Bible Builder. So Epix put out Bible Builder at the end of their run, and then this religious video company acquired Epix to get Bible Builder, and they got the entire Epix catalog at the same time.
Wow.
But they don't know anything about games, and it's really hard to get the rights to any of those games back because they don't understand games, and they think that everything is a Harry Potter that's going to make billions of dollars.
Oh, jeez.
So I tried so I asked them when I started this project, would you guys work with me to get this game out? And they said, yeah. I spent 2 years writing the game on my own in my spare time while I'm doing LEDs. And I finished it, and then I contacted them, and they said, okay, so we want $300,000 up front and guaranteed sales of this amount. And I'm like, what? So you can use the name, right? And I'm like, I'm just a guy living in a suburb, making LED displays. I'm not rich.
Yeah.
And so, it all fell apart at that point. So I was bitter about it for a very long time. And then after maybe about 5 years ago, I finally got over being bitter. And then a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, actually after that, about every 2 years, somebody would contact me and say, we want to redo Chips Challenge. And I'd say, well, okay, contact this guy. Contact these people, see if you can get the rights. And that always shut them up. So anyway, some guy came to me and says, I want to put Chips Challenge on the iPhone. And I've got venture capital. I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Contact these people, see if you can get the rights. And he contacted them. This was Barn Cleve. He and I co-founded Niffler, and he couldn't get the rights. And he said, but still, it's a great game, And I said, well, what I want to do is I want to release Chips Challenge 2, but I can't because the code's not clean, because they provided me the source code to Chips Challenge when I started it so that I could make it as close as possible. But we came up with this idea. We could do a game that's very much like it, and we could say from the designer of Chips Challenge. We could put that was legal to put in the description. So when people did a search for Chips Challenge, they would find this game, and Barnes said, let's call it Chuck's Challenge. So I said, okay. So then they came up with this funny little story, and I play a character in the game. Nice. So there's this caricature of me, this balding middle-aged guy in a Hawaiian shirt, and I get abducted by an alien who is also a game, and he wants me to design levels for him.
Nice.
So that's Chuck's Challenge. And
that's
then
great.
After about 5 or 6 years of negotiating with the company who owned the name Chips Challenge, we finally were able to get a revenue sharing deal with them that did not require any upfront money.
Nice.
And Barn pleaded with them and said, look, it's been 25 years. You haven't done anything with this title. You're not going to make any money off this title if you don't do something with it. And we can't wait another 25 years for 50. Nobody's going to know the game. So it's now or never. And it was not a really good deal. They got a really big share of the revenue.
Jeez.
But we did get it out, and we're still in debt.
Jeez.
So when Chuck's Challenge was done, I'm writing LED embedded software for a living. I can't write the game. So we hired an outside studio to write it, and artists and stuff like that. So the venture capital that came in was actually Barnes' own personal money that he had saved up to do this project. Bless his soul. We still owe the studio money, and we're still working with them, doing more stuff. And we actually do pay occasionally, so they still they still work with us. But that studio is also having financial problems.
Oh,
but I haven't made any money at all off of Chuck's Challenge. Like I said, we're still in debt on that. I did do most of the work on Chip's Challenge too. It's actually the original Microsoft Foundation class code that we released, and we patched it up so that it would hook into Steam, and cleaned up a couple bugs and released it. But that was like a couple months of my time in the evenings, and all the money that we've made off of Chip's Challenge has gone to pay off our debt on Chuck's Challenge. And we're still in debt. So
trying to fill the
hole. I am not driving around a Ferrari off of my games for sure.
Yeah.
So Chuck, have you ever thought of porting, say, Snake Byte to the iPhone and making the original one plus maybe an enhanced version of it? Because it's the kind of game that you can sit and play on a train or a plane or something like that.
I suppose you could, if you. It's. You may think it's easy to play, and maybe they did it okay on the Nokia, but phones like an iPhone don't actually have a joystick on them, right? So you don't have a little thumb joystick that you can wiggle around. Now you could play it pinball style with 2 buttons, which is the best way to play Snake Byte. Left, right, relative. Mm-hmm. But with because you don't have to move your thumbs around. Your thumbs around. But with 4 buttons for all 4 directions, it's really, really hard to play that game on an iPhone.
Yeah, left, right would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I thought about it, and I'm pretty sure I could get the rights back. Because I'm good friends with Jerry. I don't know actually who owns it. It's probably owned by anybody right now. But yeah,
nice.
I don't know.
So you code. You basically do code every day, but you code on LED. Code LED software, right?
I am an embedded systems programmer.
All right. And you program it in C?
It depends on the project. I work with a couple different microprocessors. Some of them are still assembly, and some of them I write in C.
Are you using a variant of a 6502 or
no? Those in the embedded world, those died out a long time ago. I use parts from Cypress and Zilog and NXP, but you probably don't know any of those.
I've heard of Zilog's been around forever. They made the Z80, didn't they?
Yeah, I do have a project right now where part of it runs on a Z8 core, but that's only for one small subsection of a larger project. And I took sample code that was supplied to me by Zilog, changed like 3 lines of code, compiled it, and I was done with that processor.
Jeez. Well, what I heard was that the 6502 chip basically has been like kind of chopped down and cannibalized to save money building the chip itself. So now you can actually get a 6502. I don't know what numbers follow it or letters or whatever, but basically it's got a super reduced instruction set because they've chopped out so many paths that they have even less commands than they did before. Uh-huh. And so programmers in Asia go and learn, like in Malaysia, they learn in college how to program the like a pseudo assembly language that goes on top that basically gets turned into this minimal list of 6502 instructions, and they use these 6502 chips in like talking bears and toys that have
funny.
They need some kind of processor operating stuff, but they need the cheapest 2-cent processor possible, and it's a chopped down 6502 that has to use a mangled language or use a language that turns into the mangled 6502
right.
It's cool. Pretty crazy. So it's still around. Cool. So you you were planning on making a game now, or you're working on a game now?
Well, I play around with different ideas, and unfortunately, I spend way too much time playing Feed the Beast, which is a Minecraft variant, and I don't concentrate on what I'm supposed to be doing game wise. My current project game wise is to take the Chips Challenge 2 engine as it was written in Microsoft Foundation class, import it into Unity. Essentially line by line, so that it's exactly the same game engine, but running under Unity. And then once I get that going, then we can port Chips Challenge 2 to platforms other than the PC.
Right.
So that's my current project.
Cool. That sounds cool. Is that your return to the industry, or is that just a side project?
I'm probably never going to give up my LED work, and in fact, technically, I'm kind of semi-retired at this point. When I'm working in the office, I'm not working very hard.
Nice.
But I actually right now we have a lot of stuff going on the LED side, so I'm busier than normal. But when basically I work on this game when I feel like it. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything. I'm certainly never going to be doing any AA title or AAA titles. I may do some more puzzle games. I may do some simple, I would say, unremarkable stuff. But I'll play around with stuff in the games field always, because I love games and I have game parties and things like that. So.
Cool.
That's what's going on with me.
Got to keep on chugging along. That's great. Awesome. Well, thanks for the stories. Do you have any other interesting stories?
So interesting stories. Actually, I do. I do have one kind of funny story that I like to tell about when I started working at Epix. They had a programmer test. They had a test that they would give to people that were applying as programmers there. And by this time, I was essentially already hired, and they knew what my capabilities were. But I guess they had to give me the programmer test anyway, because of some reason. And so the guy who gave me the test, Craig Nelson, was my manager, who eventually ended up being my roommate. He asked me, he says, so here's our programmer test. He says, pick any processor you want to. How would you clear a page of memory? And I kind of looked at it, and my first reaction was I kind of laughed, and I said, that's your programmer test? And he goes, yeah. And I said, really? He goes, yeah. And he goes, and his basic response was, so you've already passed the test. Because
you laughed at it.
Well, yeah, the correct answer is to be incredulous about the test.
It's so simple.
That is exactly, because if you think that question is too simple to be the test, then they know that you're a good programmer.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So I said, well, okay. He said, so how would you answer it? And I said, okay, so, well, I don't know. I would load A up with 0, transfer it to Y, and then do a store with the page comma Y, decrement Y, and branch not equal. So I throw those instructions out verbally. I didn't write it down or anything.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, okay, so, sometimes we maybe give more points for loading A and then transferring to Y, and, the fact that you did the transfer to Y instead of loading Y, that's good points. And, and there's debate on whether or not you should load A or load Y first and then do the transfer, and whether or not you should increment or decrement, because if you decrement, then you're technically storing to 0 first and then storing at the end of the page and working back down to 0. Whereas if you increment, you start at 0 and fill the page up, and then you wrap back around. And it's just the order in which you're filling the page, right?
Yeah.
And we discussed these things, right? And then and then he said, okay, so how would you do it faster? And I said, I don't know. I would break the page in half and do 2 stores, and then He says, right, you would unwind the loop.
Yeah.
And he says, so what would be the very fastest way to do it? And I said, it would be 256 store instructions. And he said, absolutely. Totally unwind the loop. And he says, so, you totally passed the test.
Nice.
So I was amused about that as, a 6502 programming test.
That's a good one. That was good. Good follow-up questions, too. Great. Well, I think that was a great interview.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you very much, Chuck.
Okay.
It was.
Well, thanks for including me in your podcast.
Thank you, Chuck. It's been an honor.
Okay.
Apple. Time Warp.